Great work.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm still recovering. I feel like I was like so zoned in. It's like I pitched 12 innings. No, I'm kidding. That's substantially harder than what I did.
That is awesome. And I got to tell you, the draft's gotten so much better, and it's so much more fun than the old days. We were talking about it, like you just find out, oh, some kid from Lake Forest got drafted in the 32nd round. Like, it was just so bizarre how it wasn't kind of what it is these days, and it's tons of fun. And friend of the program, Jim Callis, your partner on Road to Wrigley, did a fantastic job. It's just good to see people that know all these names and understand the sport in the way that you guys do. So tons of fun. I think the Sox did fine with that pitcher, with Hagen Smith. He looks like a guy that I heard Mike Shirley say that he's a varsity player. Apparently, they're calling the SEC the varsity because that's the difference between it and other conferences. So being able to plow his way through a lot of SEC bats speaks volumes about what the guy's capable of.
Yeah, I mean, he had insane results. Him and Chase Burns, the pitcher who went before him, second to the Reds, who the Cubs might see for a very long time, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, he dominated. The big thing that jumped out for me, as you heard in the little tease you guys threw in there, is he missed like so many bats in the zone and didn't allow contact in the zone. And it's interesting because Chase Burns is a guy who is like big in stuff models. Like everything he throws is hard. It all moves a lot. You know, you project it out and it's like, this guy will be good at the major league level. Hagen Smith's a bit different. The results are incredible there. He just got to things in a very different way than Burns did. So he was like low slot. His release is super far towards the first base side, kind of upshot fastball two-plane, which works, and it's weird from that angle. So it's just a visual, I think, that hitters never got used to in D1. And the White Sox bet is probably that continues. You know, I don't know if they're really betting on, jumping him a tick or two in velo. They're probably not going to rework the slider because it was so good. Maybe they add in another pitch or two, but, he was so good versus opposite-handedness. In terms of left-handed pitcher, he's a left-handed pitcher throwing to right-handed hitters, that I just don't really think there's much that needs to be changed there, where you just kind of send him through higher levels, you see how he does. They have Brian Bannister at the helm too, which I mentioned on the broadcast, but I do think that organization's gone from being one that you're a bit terrified to go to as a pitcher to now one that I'm much more confident you go to as a pitcher, that you might actually get some really good instruction from some of the guys there and coaches there. They had one of the biggest velo jumps as an organization on the minor league side year over year from 23 to 24. Like, I do think things are looking up on the pitching side for the White Sox, and I think Hagen lands in a really interesting spot.
That's good to hear. I'm sure that White Sox fans love hearing that the Sox have become a place, or starting to become a place where they could develop pitchers, and I think Garrett Crochet is a good example of that. That was the Sox decision to do what they've done, and they've developed him nicely as a starter this year. If you project Hagen Smith, the we're talking about here, Sox taking at number 5 overall, lefty pitcher. Where do you think he is in a rotation? Do you think he's got a chance to be a top guy, or is he more like a 2 or 3 in a rotation? What's your early projection on Hagen Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, you look at projections in a variety of ways. Like, projections, I think, are like a range of outcomes. I think a lot of the times, even sometimes on the network, MLB Network and stuff, you go towards like the top end projections. So you're projecting guys relative to what could they become if you hit the absolute awesome, best outcome possible. And I think that irks some people because it's like, oh, you're comping this kid who hasn't thrown a pitch in the minor leagues to like a Hall of Famer. So I look at projections more from like, what's the most likely outcome, and then what could you capture if everything breaks in the right direction. So I think he's more like a 2-3, but I think there's upside for like a 1-2. I wouldn't say he has that upside of being like a true ace, which honestly I think Crochet's landed on. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone saw Crochet with that much upside, especially being like a reliever of Tennessee and such. So, we're wrong on this stuff a good amount of the time. Yeah, you saw a lot of the mocks too. I mean, like, what was the best mock had 9 picks, right? Out of, however many in the first round? It's hard. This stuff's really hard to do. But, I mean, I think he's like a 2-3. I think that's like a fair outcome for him, which is a really good pitcher, and one that, especially in a draft that I think fell off really hard with college pitching. And you saw that too with a guy like Trey Savage sliding. I don't know if that was medicals or what. I was a bit surprised the Cubs passed on him, but he goes 20 to the Blue Jays. That was a guy that I think everyone thought the floor was like 15. So I'm not stunned that Burns and Smith, who were two guys that I thought were projected a little lower. Like Burns was projected and mocked a ton to the Rockies at 3. Hagen was projected to the Cardinals at 7, and both those guys jumped 2 picks above that. I think it was just a spot where teams were like, these are the best 2 pitchers by a large margin, especially if we're not confident in that ECU kid is Savage. So let's take them. Let's take them above Condon, Jack Caglione, and Weatherholt, who I think a lot of people projected really strongly. So maybe some people on the White Sox side maybe thought that they should have gone with Jack or JJ, which I understand because that system is a little bit deeper on the pitching side right now. And I also think, again, with guys like Bannister and others in that organization, you should be able to take later arms and develop them into guys. So maybe you should have gone with a bat if you kind of only are looking at that system and seeing Colton Montgomery as a guy that long-term is a, 160 games a season guy who has juice. But I don't mind the Hagen Smith pick. If I was that front office, would I have gone with Jack or JJ? It's a really good conversation. I would have loved to have been in the room to hear, because I think that you could put a third on probabilities there. So which one of these guys pops and is a better player in a couple of years? Jack's like the huge exit velocities. That would have been a ton of fun to see. Weatherholt's like your speedy shortstop, can stick there. Contact quality's great. And then Hagen's like a weird lefty with a ton of zone miss. So each of those guys has strengths. I haven't heard the rationale on why the White Sox went Smith over Jack and JJ. I'm not sure if anyone's asked that to guess or anybody else, but I'd be curious to see what they thought.
I'm curious your thoughts on Cam Smith. He went 14th to the Cubs, did very well in the prestigious Cape Cod League. You love seeing that kind of thing. Then they doubled back and they got another college infielder, Cole Mathis from the College of Charleston at 54. Let's talk Smith and Mathis if we could for a minute.
Let's do it, yeah. So Smith, I'll start with this. So I feel like the Cubs are getting to a spot, and I say this lovingly to Derek Hedgeworth, who's the VP of scouting there, but they're getting to a spot where if you performed in college and you did well on the Cape and you're a college hitter, you're a Chicago Cub. It seems like what they're going towards, honestly. I mean, you got like Matt Shaw, you got all these other guys in the past, too, that they've nailed. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think that archetype of player has been pretty good over the last couple of years. Like, I know some of the college backs that have gone in the top 15 recently, think of like a J.J. Bleday or even like an Andrew Vaughn with the White Sox, maybe haven't panned out if Torkelson, too, in the way that you would expect based on how some of those projections went early when they were drafted. But Cam Smith looks great. Both these guys look amazing from the pure, like, batted ball data standpoint. Like, how hard are these guys hitting the ball? They're ranking really well. I mean, you even look alongside some of the other guys that went before him, like a James Tibbs, went to the Giants. I thought he would have been in play for the Cubs. He's a guy who had really good results, but Cam Smith hits the ball harder, had better max exit velocities, better barrel rate, or similar barrel rate. Bat speed projection looks pretty similar on those two guys. Tibbs just performed a little better. Also, the FSU kids, you can kind of put them one-to-one and comp them. The thing with Cam Smith that jumps out is the batted ball quality is good, so how hard he's hitting the ball is good, but the directions in which he's hitting the ball are not ideal relative to pretty much everyone else around him in the class. Cam hit a lot of ground balls, didn't hit a lot of line drives, didn't hit a lot of fly balls, didn't pull a lot of his fly balls. That, to me, feels like something that's very adjustable, where I don't know if it's like a path problem, I don't know if it's a swing problem, whatever, but he goes into the Cubs organization that has had a really good track record of changing guys into being better versions of themselves. For me, this is as much a bet, and I don't know what the Cubs are going to say, this is as much a bet on that hitting department to turn the raw batted ball data into really good outcomes by adjusting the kind of contact he's making, getting him to pull the ball in the air more, getting him to spray more, I want more line drives, getting the ball off the ground. You're betting on Justin Stone, you're betting on other guys in the org, who's Justin Stone's the director of hitting with the Cubs, to kind of fix this swing a bit and get him to a point where he projects as an average third baseman, maybe a little bit better defensively, and he turns into a bat that becomes more impact because of what the organization does. So I think they're going to put their stamp on him in that respect. So if he gets, if they jump him to high A really quick or something, pass him through Myrtle, I would not really make too much of what's going on from like a result standpoint. I just want to see what they did this offseason into next year in terms of what they do swing-wise with him and how he looks coming out in 2025. Jumping in Cole Mathis, again, this guy's another one where it's just massive exit velocities. Like, I get it's this weaker conference, et cetera. People might be skeptical that it's not SEC, it's not ACC, whatever. The dude torched the ball. Like, he pops in everything in that respect. We saw him at the Combine, too. I did stuff for MLB Network. He was hitting tanks there. He's more of a first baseman. He also kind of pitched a bit, so it was a bit surprising that they announced him as a third baseman. So you get a pair of third basemen off the top, which is, I don't know exactly if I thought they were going to do that. My perception of the organization from the minor league side is that I was hoping they'd take a picture. I was hoping they'd take a Savage or someone else and build that out. Maybe they're planning on doing that now and ripping like 3 or 4 pitchers off that they like. I just thought there was a lot of value in the second round in terms of pitching. You know, you pass on a guy like Saintja, who goes to the Mariners, the switch pitcher. You pass on a guy like the Savage. Like, the Cubs had to be super confident in what they could do to Cam Smith to not, I think, go towards what might be the slight weakness in the org, which is pitching depth, right? Like, Drew Gray is a crazy walk rate in the minors. Like, I don't really know if he's as strong of a prospect as everyone thought coming into the season. Jackson Wiggins, who was a second rounder last year, looks fantastic. So maybe they're betting on him. Maybe they're betting on like Wicks and Ben Brown and all these other guys in the majors having such good careers and projecting them strong going forward that, you know, the timeline isn't necessary to build out a ton of pitching. But as Jed will say, like, you never have enough pitching. So that's, and especially being the pitching guy, that's like very obvious that I just wanted pitching because I love talking about pitching. But yeah, I get it. I get if you're a Cubs fan and you're looking at the draft and you're going, why do they take 2 third basemen? You think that's present need, et cetera. But I don't mind the draft. They went on exit velocity. They went on guys that I think are relatively safe relative to some of the other guys around them. So a lot of words there, but that's kind of my overall take on it.
No, I mean, I agree with you, and I get what you're saying. I'll even take it a step further with the pitching. Obviously, that was kind of a bit of a blind spot for the Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer regime in developing pitchers, so I think that there's still a little bit of trauma, not necessarily with the front office, but maybe fans. Like, can the Cubs develop pitchers? And they've gotten better at it recently. Justin Steele is a pretty good example of a guy that came through their system. But I do want to ask you about Cam Smith and the third baseman. And we talked to Bruce Levine earlier, your colleague and ours, and you know he says that he believes that Cam Smith can and will be, or could very possibly be, a third baseman at the major league level, and maybe you kick Morel to the outfield. And I know that's getting very ahead because we have no idea what Cam Smith is going to be like or how fast he's going to make it through the minors. But do you think that that's a plausible scenario? Like, is Morel is this just a one-off year for him, giving him a third base, and then maybe he goes somewhere else next year or in the future years? Or DH even?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think if you're to get better at a defensive position, your basically entire offseason focus needs to be on that thing. And you look at this, and the name that jumps out is like J.D. Davis, who was a terrible defender for a really long time, goes to the Giants, and I believe that offseason prior to being with the Giants, just like worked with a defensive guru the entire offseason and got really good and ended up being an above average third baseman. That is like what you're going to have to devote to in terms of Morel. The big thing with Morel is like the season arc and trajectory for him has been weird to me, where it's like off the top you're like, is this guy an MVP candidate? You know, and then it's like, phew, complete down, bottoms out in terms of what the production's been, slug his way down, which is perplexing, but the discipline looks great. So you see some improvements there. It's just what he's actually doing from a batted ball standpoint hasn't really caught up to some extent. So I'd be fascinated. That's the guy, like, you go exit meeting on the season, whatever that may be. Like, that's the first question is, like, what's the plan for Morel in the offseason? And I don't know if the Cubs are going to tell you, but it's a great point. Like, do you want him to allocate resources to becoming a better hitter in the offseason? Do you want to allocate resources to him just becoming the third baseman that you're confident in rolling out every single day next year? Like, they're great questions, you know? Like, I think Cam can play third. The thing with a lot of draft picks is, like, I don't think you need to solidify, like, what the guy is right now. Like, any of these guys is going to go into an org and play the position, the upside position that you want them to play, probably for a year to a year and a half. You know, like the Pirates took that kid Kellen Lindsey, right, the high schooler, who I believe was mostly scouted as an outfielder and then selected as a shortstop. Like, is he a shortstop? I don't know, but it doesn't matter because he's going to play short for 2 years. You're going to see what he is, and then, okay, cool, he's now an outfielder, and, like, he'll be able to pick that up quicker if he's been playing short. Like, you play the more difficult position and then go from there. So for Cam Smith, it's like, he's probably going to play third base for 2 years. Like, just give him 200 games in the minors at third and see what we have. Like, the grades defensively look fine. So I have no reason to doubt that he can play third. It's not like he's going to be Nolan Arenado at third base defensively, but that's not the point. Like, that's not what you are drafting him for. You're drafting him to be, like, probably an average third baseman and to be an impact bat. And, again, the big thing for him is becoming that impact bat, lifting the ball more on a guy like Cam Smith. But, yeah, that's why I take Morel. Like, That's the first exit interview question. Is like, what's the plan with Morel? Like, what are you doing in the off season with him? And maybe we don't find that out until spring when you ask Morel directly, and you're like, hey, what did you do this off season? And he's like, yeah, I worked with this defensive guru for the last 4 months. And it's like, I'm a better third baseman now. And everyone's like, here you go. Like, here's the third baseman of the future.
That'd be ideal.
We'll see.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
All right. No matter what happens on either side of town, we're going to be covering every move prior to the July 30th deadline right here on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score and the live on the free Odyssey app. And we will be debating, will the Cubs decide to buy, sell, or stand pat during this up and down season? And Lance, we were discussing that question this morning, and there's a report from Bob Nightingale that they're out looking at Danny Jansen, a catcher with Toronto. And we wonder, is it that sort of buying? Is it modest buying? I don't think they're selling after the 5-2 close to the season. We look at the draft. We're always looking for breadcrumbs as to what they are going to decide to do. Are they going to buy, sell, or stand pat?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have no inside info here. My impression right now is it's probably like a soft buy, where it's like they'll pick up a piece or two and maybe add a bullpen piece or something. And that's a byproduct of the fact that I'm not entirely sure how much they have to sell. And I don't necessarily know if they make sense for some of the bigger buys. I will say, and again, this is purely my opinion, Garrett Crochet is a guy that I don't think is going to get traded because I just don't know how teams are projecting out his innings. If that's a massive jump, and if you're buying him for team control next year, he's a really weird guy where it's like, do you buy him and push him to the pen, or do you buy him and shut him down and then try to ramp him back up in September for the postseason? It's just, he doesn't line up. Like, if they want, like they've been rumored, was it Nightingale or Heyman or someone had like Spencer Jones from the Yankees?
Yes.
I mean, I know Jones' performance isn't great right now, but like Jones is like a top 20 prospect. I don't think you trade Spencer Jones for Garrett Crochet. If that's the ask, there's no chance he's going anywhere. Because I'm not confident he's going to go give you 30 innings in the postseason. You push him up to 200 innings, it'd be more than doubling his inning total. What makes it really interesting, you have to line him up if you want to trade him in like your trade machine speculation. You got to line him with a team that maybe doesn't make a deep playoff run, has prospects to give, and is kind of trying to lock on next year. I think the Cubs have a shot to make the playoffs just because the NL is such a complete mess that they probably can make a run because of Steele and Shota at the top. I actually think the Cubs have the prospects to go get Crochet, where it's like you have guys you could turn over. I'm not sure if the White Sox line up in this respect, and I don't know if the Cubs are going to want to pay for a guy next year, but the Cubs have had success jumping guys large innings because I think they have a really good strength department and really good understanding of workload management and some of the guys they have in the front office and on the training staff. I'd love to see him give some guts for Crochet. I think it lines up really well. Because
I love it.
If this team like goes on a weird stretch over the next 15 games, and like they're kind of down, like I don't know if the White Sox just hold that ask super high, but if they come down on that at all, and teams' assessments are that he can't go 200 innings this season, if I'm the Cubs, I take him and shut him down. And then have him for 150 plus next year.
Wow.
And then you have two of the best left-handed starters in baseball at the top of your rotation. I guess it's a hot take. Again, I have zero inside info here as to whether this is even a remote possibility.
Yeah.
But Crochet has to line up with a team that you're not entirely sure is going to make like a deep World Series run because you're buying him for nothing, in fact. And I think the Cubs are in a very unique spot where they have a lot of prospects, and they kind of, right now at least, being 8.5 out of the division and a couple out of the wild card, unless you can convince me that team makes a big turnaround in the next couple weeks, which I very much think they can, right? 3.5 out of the wild card. So I just think it's a fun thought that I've had in my head. I'm surprised no one's brought up.
Boy, I got to tell you, that would be a sports radio topic, fantastic topic.
Jose Quintana Part 2, but this time it's Garrett Crochet.
That's awesome.
Better than Quintana.
Lefty power.
I'd like to think so.
Thank you, buddy. That is outstanding stuff. We'll have to get into that a little bit. See you, Lance.